Deputy Speaker. Today is a political lesson in never giving up. Despite all of the lobbying noise of vested interests, the constant denials of market failure and numerous attempts to get energy bill payers to shop around, the government could no longer ignore that the majority of energy bill payers have and are being ripped off. This bill has a virtuous purpose: to protect customers from unfair energy prices in a market that sadly has failed to deliver. The bill's greatest shortcoming is its timing. In October 2011, I first raised the failings of the UK energy market, the overcharging, the poor value for money offered by the Big Six. That year, 2011, energy prices had risen by 20%. Data required by the last Labour government had become available for those with an anorak interest in tracking what was happening with prices. It was becoming clear that prices did not reflect wholesale costs, and those on standard variable tariffs were paying over the odds. The coalition government of Conservatives and Liberal Democrats tried to reform, but they had little to offer to affect the pricing structure of this failing retail market. Yes, the government did oppose Labour's energy price freeze. That was a proposal to cap prices for 20 months while the energy market was reformed, but the government did know that they were on the back foot as evidence of overcharging mounted. David Cameron's agreement to a Competition and Markets Authority review in 2014 was an attempt to take the pressure off government and kick the issue beyond the 2015 general election. It worked, but it further delayed action. It must have come as quite a surprise to some in the government that the CMA's findings vindicated Labour's concern about unfair energy prices. 2 years to reach conclusions that some of us had already exposed, that customers were being systematically overcharged. From 2012 to 2015, people were overcharged by an average of £1.4 billion per year, with the detriment increasing to £2 billion a year by 2015. By the time the CMA reported the damage, overcharging since 2012 was over £8 billion. Delay has cost consumers dear. No doubt some may have thought the introduction of a price cap for prepayment meter customers would have laid the matter to rest, but that was never going to be the case. Ministers and those on the government benches are now keen to talk about market failure, systemic overpricing, using language myself and the Labour Party were condemned for only a few years before. Too slow by half. But now, cross-party support, the government taking action, support on these benches, we have the opportunity to serve notice on injustice and make this bill law by introducing price protection for consumers. Now, I believe it should take the form of a protected tariff. In fact, I argued for such protection after the general election in 2015. Consumers need nothing less than a regulated maximum charge which is based on wholesale prices, network costs and an acceptable level of profit set by Ofgem. To expose market failure is not to be against all markets. Despite privatisation, energy has always rightly been a managed market. With changes to our energy generation, contracts for difference, capacity markets, that is the case today. And I believe across this House and British society, there is a recognition that certain products, like energy and water, require a different level of government intervention and regulation. Even today, with record levels of switching, around 5 million people switched in 2017, many of the criticisms I levelled at the energy market in 2011 still apply today. The market is still dominated by the Big Six. Between them, they control 78% of the market. The biggest new entrant in the market has just 1% of market share. Movements in energy prices bear little relation to the movement in wholesale prices. A majority of customers have little faith in switching and have not changed supplier in a decade or more. And the majority, as we all know, sit on these expensive default standard variable tariffs. Over 5 million people have been helped with a safeguard tariff. And this bill addresses the 11 million households who are overcharged year in and year out. So what should we do? Let's build on the cross-party support and through this bill defend the principle of a short-term cap on a failing market. We should not be cowed by the self-interested propaganda we have heard from opponents to the price cap. At the extreme end, we have Centrica, linking its plan to shed jobs up to 2020 to the price cap. I think this is outrageous. Centrica has lived off its nationalised legacy, a sticky customer base that it has treated badly. Business analysts observed that British Gas's businesses supplying energy to businesses has been performing poorly. They observed that Centrica's US operation, Direct Energy, has underperformed. And they note that of those employed by Centrica, almost 80% are abroad. Just 1 in 5 are in the UK, and those jobs are important. But it's little surprise that trade unions representing Centrica employees, Unite the Union, GMB and Unison, are rightly sceptical about why their UK employees may bear the brunt of corporate failures internationally under the leadership of Ian Conn. A cap does not mean an end to competition. A reasonably set upper limit on unit prices reviewed every 6 months allows lots of opportunity for competition beneath the cap. It's not a difficult concept. The cap is a maximum. It is not a requirement to charge prices at that level, and the industry knows this full well. But they also know it will put a bar on unfair prices and not before time. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm listening, fascinated by her speech. She's aware that there's been a history of oligopoly abuse in terms of delays, in terms of when commodity world prices change, there's delays in the prices and excessive differentials. Does she think it's possible to have a relatively simple system that takes those two factors, but also uses this opportunity to encourage renewables?
Absolutely, and I'm just going to come on to something about renewables, because I would say to the ministers on the government benches to beware of any proposals to exempt green tariffs or low carbon tariffs from the price cap, because let me be clear why. 75% of the days in 2017, wind power supplied more energy than coal power in the UK. Nuclear and renewables are central to our power output in the UK energy market, and the generators are well rewarded for it. The notion that any energy provider should charge a premium for so-called green tariffs does not stand up to scrutiny. Consumer support for 100% green energy is welcome, but the idea that they should pay the most expensive tariff is just not justifiable. So I hope the Secretary of State will rule this out and deliver a comprehensive cap. I give way to the Right Honourable.
I'm very grateful, Honourable Lady. I'm listening with increasing admiration to the speech, which reminds me of why there was a Labour Party that I had a great deal more sympathy with than current front bench. And can I just say how strongly I agree with what she says about the green tariffs. We want to promote green energy. We want to promote it on a basis which is economically rational.
I welcome the cross-party support that continues to blossom on this issue this afternoon. I urge ministers to ensure that Ofgem is equipped with all the powers it needs to act as a consumer champion and to both deliver a price cap and deliver penalties for corporate misbehaviour. I have not been uncritical of Ofgem. For too long, the regulator did not hold the Big Six to account for poor customer service. Where fines were issued, companies were allowed to strike a deal to use the so-called fine to subsidise tariffs for new customers. Nothing for their loyal customers stuck on default tariffs. Thankfully, that has changed. We saw last week the CMA having to rule on a challenge by SSE and the EDF against Ofgem when they tried to modify industry rules. Ofgem determined that those modifications would have led to consumers paying £120 million rebate to generators and said no. Ofgem was immediately challenged. In this instance, the CMA backed Ofgem and the consumer interest was protected. But let's be under no illusion. There is a constant veiled threat that the energy giants will contest their decisions. And we need to be certain that through this legislation, Ofgem has the powers and remedies it needs so it can do a job this House expects and does not become a scapegoat for failure. Finally, may I urge ministers to use the period of the cap to review the structure of the energy market. Good regulation, fairness and innovation from existing and new players must all be part of a reshaped energy market of the future. Let's get on with it. This bill has my support. Let's give Ofgem the power to act and cap unfair energy bills.
James Heath.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is an important bill that comes on a very